Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Nightly Restorative Check-In through the National Parents Union. It is December 4th. I get confused here about the time and the dates because time just keeps moving across so quickly. And I think it's hard to believe that we're already in December here with this pandemic. For those of you who don't know me, I am Dr. Enjolie. I'm here on Autumn Land, this beautiful Sonoran desert in the state of Arizona. And physically, actually, right now, I'm in the space for the Siwapatli Collective, which I will give a little background about that here in a second. But it's the nonprofit organization that I'm a co-founder of. And this has been a space that has recently come together. And I happen to be here today, so I'm actually really happy to be coming to you from this location. Forgive me. So because I'm in this location, that also means that there's some things going on in the background. So I hope you can't hear it, but if you can, somebody let me know and I'll tell somebody to be quiet. But anyway, so the Nightly Restorative Check-In is actually the brainchild of my guest. I'm really excited to have Marisol Quevedo Rerucha on. So I always say that this is the way that I think of the Nightly Restorative Check-In. She's going to come in and maybe tell me what she thinks about it, her conception of it. But I think of it's a check-in for caregivers, for parents, for educators. And I always think about like what I want to be doing on a Friday. On a Friday, I want to chill. I want good food. I want to be snuggled up, and yeah, that's just my ideal. But I want to have deep conversations. I want somebody to check on me and for me to be able to check on them and to really be able to kind of share at a much deeper level, since maybe we can rest the next day, right? Since there's not the rat race of getting through the day. So I originally was a guest on Marisol's show, right? This is her show that she so graciously has brought me on to co-host with her. And she brought me on because I'm a psychologist and a hypnotherapist. And on that first show, I introduced a breathing pattern titled 478. I should say it's not my breathing pattern, which is really sweet. Sometimes people will like hear it elsewhere and they'll be like, hey, I saw your breath pattern. It's not mine. I didn't make it up. I just did the research. But the way that 478 works is that you inhale for 4 seconds. You exhale for 7 seconds. No, hang on, I'm starting wrong. Inhale for 4. Hold your breath for 7, exhale for 8 seconds. And then we do that 4 times around. I will count it out for you. And probably like if I could give you a tip on the exhale, when you're exhaling out for 8 seconds, I find that to be the hardest part or the most unnatural part. So what you want to do is you're almost like holding your breath, but then also pushing out at the same time, which kind of can feel weird, like I said, if it's your first time. So the other ways that this breath pattern is used is I use it as a transition, as I'm moving from one event to the next. That's how I use it. It's also really effective for sleep. And so if you struggle with insomnia or you wake up in the middle of the night, try this breath pattern. Now that's how Marisol uses it. I want to say hi to the people in the chat. Hello, Yolanda, Gabby, Maritza. All right, so let's go through and start this breath pattern. I always encourage you to like find a focal point, look at your feet, or close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. All right, I have to get myself settled. It requires energy to greet you, and then I got to pull it back in. Okay. So if you're ready, go ahead and close your eyes and take a normal breath, inhaling in and exhaling out. And on your next inhalation, take it in for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, release, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Go back to your regular breath pattern. All right. I hope that you feel like you've arrived, right? I hope that you feel centered and grounded. It's actually my second time leading this breath pattern today. So I feel more settled. I don't know if it's you that I'm feeling, the audience, or if it's just me. But anyway, I hope that you feel good. Okay, so let me finish introducing myself before I have the pleasure of introducing Marisol. I've talked to you about who I am professionally, but who I am personally, as far as my family and my community, are particularly important to me. I am originally from Southern California. My father was Afro-Cuban, so we are at Taino and Arawak. My mom was from Guatemala, so we're from Maya territory. Many of you have seen my sister and brother on the show, and if you haven't, go back to like my first shows in late July, mid-July, somewhere in July. I'm also a mom to a now 21-year-old daughter, and there's some various other identities like being a widow that are also salient and important to my experience. I brought up the collective, and that I'm in the casita is what we call it, right, in our space. So I'm a member of the Siwapatli collective. Siwapatli means women's medicine. And so we focus on Indigenous mothering. We like to say that we support women and their families from womb to tomb. So I just have one quick announcement, right? After letting you know who I am, I want to encourage you, those of you who are not members, to use the link that's connected to this announcement for this StreamYard and for this live posting. Become a member. You get information about all of the events that are going on. It doesn't cost anything, right? We just need a way to communicate with you through your email address. So please do that if and when you have time. And then now I get to bring on Marisol. I thought about this and like how I introduced her. There's so many things I could say about her, but I realized that you all are used to seeing Marisol host the show, but you've maybe never heard her bio. And I don't know if I've actually heard her bio before. So I thought I would actually just read her bio out loud because we know she's amazing, but maybe we don't all fully have context, right, for why she's so amazing and the depth of her experience. I will start by saying that obviously I've been doing the show for a little bit now, and I knew that Marisol was in the process of writing a book, and I wanted to bring her on when the book was kind of made public, right? So it was announced this week that her book, Beyond the Surface of Restorative Practices, will be released in January of 2021, and she promises to share the date with us when she gets it. But I'm going to read her bio. So Marisol is a proven leader who doesn't just talk about healing, equity, social justice, and disrupting generational trauma. She has both lived experience and a proven record of doing this work while leading change in education and nonprofit systems. She is a former teacher, principal, and district leader who uses her voice to challenge systems of oppression, and more importantly, amplifies the voice of others. Marisol's passion for supporting our nation's alternative schools illustrates how she uses her gifts and talents to support students that are most marginalized. She has engaged in the real work of addressing and ending the school-to-prison pipeline by building and leading career readiness and career technical education in juvenile courts and community schools. The impact of her passion, experience, work, and voice is felt beyond her own community as she serves in the following ways: as the Chief of Partnership and Strategy for the National Parents Union, the Director of Culture and Community for DBC Inc. She's the co-chair of Unidos US National Institute for the Latino School Leaders Alumni Council. She's the board member of Youth Empowerment's Finest and as a partner with organizations for nonprofits and for-profit businesses, helping them to provide comprehensive strategic action planning. Other than that, she's also just an amazing chingona. And my comadre, my friend, somebody that I can't imagine, really at this point in my life, can't imagine my life without her. So I want to introduce Marisol. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. That was, so first of all, that breathing technique, wow. I led it twice today, both with one person who was transitioning, needed to reclaim their energy. And then also I led a community circle and we did the technique. So I'm starting to integrate that technique in different spaces. And it was also, it was kind of weird hearing my bio read.
I read was weird because I read it wrong. No, I'm kidding. Or it was just weird because it's hard to hear about yourself.
Yeah, it's just, yes, yeah.
Which I think we'll talk a little bit more about, like the difficulty with hearing about yourself. But I respect that and I hear that. Yeah. It's this alternative reality when we hear about ourselves. You have a gorgeous, beautiful way of introducing yourself. And so I do want to get there. But really quick, just I want to ask you, you said that you used the breath pattern twice today. What do you experience like from the crowd, so to speak, from the crowd when you administrate the breath pattern?
Well, I think there's two things. One, on the end of the person guiding, it's very meditative. So it almost feels like an intentional walk into the work, which is very different from experiencing it as somebody that's being guided through it. So every time that I do it, because I kind of like I check, I look, and people seem there's a visual, like, okay, like we're ready to enter the space. It's very grounding, very grounding.
And I have the comment on from Judith of I have arrived, and you know she's being silly, but also I believe her. She's being serious, right? And that's actually how I feel. And that's my intention for y'all to like feel like you walked into like energetically walked into the door, right? And you're ready. So I'm glad to hear you say that, like, yeah, you notice it on other people. And it is just one of those weird things where like I know what I experienced, but I don't really get to check in with other people of like, what's it like for you?
Well, I'm really loving that because, and I'll transition into introduce myself. I love that because that sense of like I've arrived. That's why I introduce myself the way that I do. And I arrive. Here is myself, but I arrive with my posse. And with your permission, I'd like to introduce myself. So I am the mother of Camerina, Emilia, and Sofia. I am the daughter to Irma and Abran. I'm the grandmother to Isabela Luna and Cynthia Iliana, and a little boy who is being baked right now, who is due to come into the world on February 18th. And I am the granddaughter to Camerina, Alejandro, Francisco, and Carmen. All of my grandparents immigrated from Mexico. And I always share this, and I shared this today because I'm going to be doing this a video series, and there was a man on the call who's from Boston College, and he was like I would rather be interviewed instead of talking about myself, like having the light shine on me. And I shared with them like the honor of being in this space, of like Judith said, of arriving in this space. It doesn't belong to just me. And what we're talking about in our work or our experience, it's really not about us in an egotistical sense. Like we are, and I really believe this, that I am the prayers of my ancestors who never held me. And because I believe that I carry the prayers, and my work is part of a prayer and hope for my future ancestors. And so any room, right, that I'm very fortunate to step into and to be in, I have a responsibility, not just to myself, and to recognize that this voice isn't just about me, that it's about where I come from, what comes next, and also everybody who's present and who the work is for. So I love that, like arriving. I feel like that's my way of arriving with my posse.
I feel you, like, and I feel you spiritually. You know what I mean? I always say like I roll deep, you know, and spiritually like I roll deep. And so I know what that feels like. I want to bring in some of the comments here too of like Judith acknowledging, you know, that the first time seeing us both together is powerful. And I want to segue that into how we know one another. But before we do that, I want to say that I really appreciate the way that you introduced yourself, and, you know, echo as well. We do it on our own ways, but I introduce myself the way that I do because within ceremony, it's a part of, well, within some ceremonies or within people I don't know, telling them where I'm from and who I come from, right? And I really appreciate what you're saying too, of that you're honoring, right, all the people who prayed for you before, right? So we like to say 7 generations, right, before you. I always think of my grandmothers. I always think of my grandmothers when I should probably name them, you know, when I introduce myself, but I tend to just introduce their lineage of that. Like they had so much vision, you know, as they were making some difficult choices that led to kind of me being here. So I feel very responsible to like the vision that they had, whether it was spoken or not, whether it was mentally like cognitively formed or not, like they had a plan, you know, and I know like you that I'm a part of that plan. It's beautiful. So let's your is Irma, no, Irma's your mom, yes? And
Yeah.
Yola is your tia. I want to say hello to Senora Castro, the 2 Senora Castros, right? And just thank you for making this beautiful child. I want us to talk about how we know one another, and I'm like already feeling emotional about this. So I don't even have a tissue nearby, but that's common, right, to what I do when I bring on my guests. So Marisol, I'm going to let you tell the story of how we know one another, and then I'm going to fill in.
Well, I had made the decision to leave education and was thinking like, I just felt like there was something more for me. I'll be very, like, I was frustrated at, you know, like the higher I got, I was frustrated at how difficult it still was to make change happen for our most vulnerable, marginalized kids. And I just felt like there's something else for me to do. So I put it out in the universe, like I got to start doing different stuff. And I think I had put like a post on about some of the different things. And my god sister, Esme, who's a part of the collective, she sent me a message. And she said, hey, what are you up to? What are you doing? And so we scheduled a phone call, and she told me about the collective, and she asked if I could support, if I would be willing to come and support through the retreat that you were having, which was really the vision of that was that there could be like a strategic plan coming out of that. And I was so, number one, honored to be able to spend time with her. And also, my godfather was a musician. My godfather, he died a couple of years ago. And whenever he was a very well-known musician in the Chicano movement, but whenever he was in a space and I would see him, he would always sing to me. And I just didn't, even though I grew up with him, I didn't necessarily grow up with his kids because they had a big family, and his kids were always going to ballet folklorico or they were doing their stuff. So I really I had the heart connection with Esme, but we really hadn't spent a lot of time together. So I was absolutely I was down. And also, I knew that ceremony, like indigenous ceremony, had been introduced to me, and it felt right. It felt, I was raised Catholic, but this actually was a space where I felt so connected. So I was very willing to get to know this amazing group of women that were focused on indigeneity. And so it was, so I showed up. I was actually traveling. And so I had to, I was coming in from Cancun. So I literally landed from Cancun to LAX airport. And I left the airport and had to go back in because I had to leave an international flight to go back in so that I could board to go to Tucson.
Wow.
Yeah, it was so anyway, and it was just such a really beautiful experience. So I've been very fortunate to lead groups and to lead teams who are doing amazing work, and mostly in the educational system. So then transferring to working, in nonprofits and supporting nonprofits in the work, it was just really beautiful. But what I remember about you and talking to you was there was, time that we were sharing, and you had shared about your daughter. And I remember asking you, so I like you would share that your daughter had come to you later in life, and that you were like that this was a new piece. And I remember asking you who your mama group was, and that I think that was a moment for us.
Absolutely. You're getting emotional. It was, and so I'll pick up. Yes, and so what I when you're the first person that asked me kind of who my support was and acknowledged. So, for those who don't know, my daughter did. She came to me when she was 18, and so I'm kind of newer in this mom role. And for those of you who know 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds and all that, it's an interesting age to kind of bring somebody into your life, right? And it was the first time that I realized that, like, oh my gosh, like when you take on kids later on, there's like all these stages that get missed. And I think of like your best friend, your sister, Atia, right? Of like what it is to become a parent without like this transition time, and then to just be like dumped into parenthood, right? And I don't say dumped because it's bad, but I mean just like the real, there's no warm up, And you were the first person who ever asked me that question to consider, like, oh my gosh, like, how did I prepare? How am I doing? And then how do I want to seek and attain support afterwards? So, and I think that just so is emblematic of like how you see people and how you see me, and the role you play in my life.
Yeah, I also I feel like I need to share, at that time I was going through a really difficult time with my own daughters. And my daughters are 26 and 25 now. So this was about 2 years ago. And so older than your daughter. And but I have had the honor of, bringing them into this world and going through all of the stages with them. But it was a time in our life when we really had to reestablish the relationships, and I had to do a lot of learning and growth, not just as a woman but also like as a mom, and release a lot of stuff. So at that time it was it was almost surreal to me to be in this amazing group of women who were focused on women, and with babies running around, and seeing your daughter and mine weren't there. And it was because that's what needed to be. But I think also knowing what I was experiencing with my daughters and the age that your daughter was at, I knew that potential, like things don't get easier when they get older. And so I think I was connecting with you in that, like knowing you were going to need it.
Yes, you did. And likewise, right? We were going through a challenging time, and and you have seen me through other challenges as well. Like for sure, like I said, there's so many things I could say about you, but you are definitely the lead, one of the leaders, right? Or the core ringleaders of my mama group, really just because you asked and you saw me. And also I think like Marisol, I think that it's also who you are to use like your wounds, your pain, your challenges, to kind of connect with another person, whether they know that or not. And I think so many of us do that too, right? We just don't necessarily share that, like, oh, the reason why I know this is because I've experienced XYZ challenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so we could talk about us all day long because this is what we do. This is just what we do. But other people might get bored. Okay. So
well, I want to say this though, because I do want to say this. You knew. So I did ask you that, but you reached out to me and you wanted to maintain the connection. Like I showed up and did this work with a group and then followed up and did work with this amazing group. But you really reached out to me and were like, hey, like we need to stay connected. And I think that that's important because this connection has really like supported you in doing this work that you're meant to do, right? And it's just a thing of you following like what like you knew that the connection needed to happen, not knowing that you would be able to get your message across media, which is so important to your soul and your heart and so necessary. But it was the way. So I just want to reinforce that because I want to, like, we all have instincts. We all have these like, and we need to learn how to follow them and trust ourselves.
I appreciate that, and I wholeheartedly agree. And I just let me add. piece to it, to speak to who you are. I'm not somebody who often or easily allows people to take care of me. So if I get a sense that you are hardy and you can take care of me and that you see me, that's really rare. And so I'm gonna grab for that, you know? And although I have my collective and they're exceptionally supportive, right? They're, do I have, well, short of women who would be considered grandmothers, I'm the person with the oldest child, right? Oh no, there's another person. But anyway, the majority of us are parenting younger kids, right? And so that's just different. The stages are different. And so yeah, I just felt incredibly seen. And yes, yeah, I feel like I'm just fighting so much emotion, you know, of that. You're right. I'm here because of you. You saw something in me, and also you just know my heart and you know my interests, and you made a way for me. And I know that you've done that for so many other people, right? Made a way for them to come into this organization, right? And so many others. So thank you for seeing me and for seeing the people that you see. Let's, like, you've done so much, Marisol. So I do want to talk about your book, but I want to, like, maybe kind of provide some more context, you know, to all the things that you've done. I know you in my mind, like you're an educator, you're a principal, right? And I think about the different populations that you work with. And then, you know, I read your bio. I know you do stuff with DBC, right? A publishing company. How do you think of yourself professionally? Like, is there an overarching word or theme around the context of what you do?
That is a great question. That is a really great question. I think that there's definitely the word transformation comes to mind. I feel like part of the work that I do is support transformation and happening. And I think that that's very true. Like that's really what educators do, right? Like that's the hope, is that we're supporting the transformation of students, and then as the school leader of our staff through the work, through the learning. And I think the different part that I've taken on is the understanding of how much healing, intentional healing, and authentic conversations need to be happening in not just school systems, but in organizations. So I think like the part of it, like there's a healing, transformation, transformative component to everything that I do.
And so how does that play into the book? And because I'm pretty sure, like, I mean, I just hearing that and like I'm thinking of the title of the book, and we can go back and forth between the book and your work. But how does that, seeing yourself as an agent of transformation, how did that play into this book topic, which is that of restorative justice? And maybe you could define that as well.
Yeah, so well, I think it's really important. Like I can't talk about that without talking about the work. And I have been beyond blessed to have worked with staff members and to have had teachers and partners come in that have taught me so much. And, you know, the greatest honor really in my life is that I'm a mom. I feel like women are like, we're creators. We receive and we nourish and we give light to life. And but it's an immense responsibility. And I was 19, I took that responsibility to really focus on becoming the best version of myself that I could, because I wanted to show my daughters, especially because I didn't make the best choice of who their biological father was. And so again, I was 19. And as part of learning, when I was chosen to not just be an assistant principal, but to be a principal, and I was in an elementary school, I felt that same honor of being chosen to lead a school and to guide and to protect. And so, you know, I had to learn as a teacher and as a mom, I was very protective of my kids and very protective of them. And I'll just, you know, like, some educators are not right. Some teachers are not right. And they are
not right. Yeah.
they're, you know, like, I mean, they harm and it's about them, and so I was very protective. But when you move into that role of a staff, you know, of your staff then has to become your primary. They have to be the ones that you protect and work with and support and their growth and their development. And it was when I moved to the alternative charter high school where, and I have to give, Tommy Ramirez, he taught me about restorative justice. I'm very punitive based. I think that's no surprise to to people who, like it's just something, especially I'm 46 years old. I'm trying to make myself older, but also just of the time. And so I learned how to celebrate people. I learned that elementary school really taught me about behavior and about function, that everybody is doing something and acting in a way because they're getting something out of it or they're looking for something, and how to really observe and look for that. And so, learning about restorative justice and that idea that when harm is done, that there's not this automatic, oh, you suspend a kid, or an automatic referral, or an automatic, but really bringing the people who were harmed and the people who did the harm together to talk and come to an understanding for the person that did the harm, for them to understand the impact of what they did, not just to this person, but also potentially to their family, to their loved ones, to their community. And for the community and the person who was harmed to develop an understanding of this person. And so really, and potentially their motivation. And so it really has become like the work of humanity and of connection. And so, Tommy really guided me through those conversations and through the understanding. And when I moved to the county office and worked in the juvenile court school, Cynthia Burton was trained in restorative practices. And so we did the training, we learned, about circles, which I think it's a very natural way of being, in having community circle and dialogue, learning those components. But it was, so I stepped into a space leading a team that had been together for decades and had decades of harm, and they were kind of factioned out. But both of the sides had a lot of trust in me. And I put a lot of work into building that trust and establishing that trust in a very authentic, real way. And out of love, really, like the basis of all of it is love. And so I worked with Cynthia, we talked about, okay, what do I do to bring this group together? Because it was bad. When you have adults that are not happy at work and are working with kids, or you have adults that are and this is true in any organization, because that what starts to happen is people start talking about each other. You have factions that are built to becomes an us versus them, which distracts from the work. And so part of my realization is that really, in this conflict, part of it is conflict resolution. We're not taught how to resolve conflict. We don't talk about, very openly about the fact that we were hurt. We don't, because it takes a lot of vulnerability. And so my staff very fortunately was willing to work with me. And, we did one-on-one, we did some mediations, like we put in a lot of work together. And it was, I think that was really where I saw and started to understand the need for this work with adults and with kids. And, so what happened is the DBC, Dave and Shelley Burgess, who owned DBC Inc., had asked me to write a book on restorative practices. And I honestly, like Enjolie, it took me a long time. It took me 2 years, and they wanted it, within 6 months. But because I didn't lead the work with students, I came into it from that administrator lens. And I also was really focused on staff, and I'm still focused on adults doing their work. It just took a while for me to get the flow, and then also find the people that needed to come in and support the work. And so, Pedro Terrazas, who is my brother and who I've had on the show in the beginning, he provided, so he's one of the contributors who provided insight as a restorative practices practitioner. So there's sections throughout the book about him talking about setting up the classroom, setting this work up with kids, seeing students for who they are in a very human way. And then, so he was really there in the beginning in our conversations. We would meet at Starbucks every Saturday at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, wow. That's early. Great.
And we were talking about the stuff that was happening at his school, the stuff with staff, stuff with kids, and, the stuff that was going on in my work, and really like building it out. And then we kind of stopped, like we got to the part where we were good. And then like it kind of like, so I submitted the book and then it kind of sat there and they brought it back to me like, hey, there's some stuff you need to work on. So at that point I had left the system, and my friend, Dr. Carolyn Gary, who I have a lot of trust and love for, her work has really been in trauma, understanding of trauma and resiliency. And so she and I were meeting every day. And so she did it. She put together a chapter on trauma, and then you and I were talking, and something that's really important in this circle has to do with listening. And so you just happened to mention to me that you were doing, I think, what did you call it? Is it effective listening?
Active listening.
And so I was like, hey, you want to write a chapter?
And I was like, yeah, sure. When knowing that I had so much on my plate, but so grateful to be invited. And I was like, how can I even say no?
Well, and so the book is really like this. It's different pieces from people, like I have the sections that Pedro had put in. I have the chapter from Carolyn that's really on trauma and resilience. And each of you also shared your story, which was beautiful. The other thing that I think is really important about the book that I talk about is the work that I've done in strategic planning, which is setting your organizational up to transform. And so, I went from like really looking at what are all of these steps that I've taken each time that I've been given the honor of leading a school or a team. And I put those in, like really started to lay out that process, which I call like setting the foundation for transformation. So to me, this work is how you get to equity through healing, through authenticity, and through providing this space for connection to happen. So I don't know if that...
Yes, it does. I mean, in that you defined, again, I think of restorative justice or restorative practices, like you said, is like not just focusing on the punitive, like what is the impact, making sure that the individual who, transgresses, does something wrong, breaks the rule, whatever you want to call it, right? That they understand the impact to themselves, the reasoning why, the impact on other people. And like you said, I love that you ended at rooting it in community. Like we don't do that enough, and so, what that can look like in community or school is just like, instead of like, we're going to ostracize you and push you out and isolate and separate, no, because we're in a relationship, we're going to pull you in. We're going to pull you in and we're going to help you understand, let's say, for example, a young man harming, young women, not in anything like particularly traumatic, but just, hey, not being nice. And they're of age, we're like, the idea of consent is important, right? The idea we want to impress that on our kids, right? Then having maybe all the women that are tias and sister age of like talking to them like, hey, this is what I go through. This is what I experience as a woman, right? And this is just an example that I'm kind of loosely pulling from actually within community, That's what I think of like one example of what restorative justice can look like. Can you give us an example? Of course, we're maintaining the confidentiality of what that looked like in any organization where you use these practices.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing that's important to mention is that aside from it's not just the conversation, it's really then together, how can the relationship be restored? Can it be restored? And if, what are the steps that the person who did the harm is going to take? So the difference is that in kind of the traditional, in schools, the traditional disciplinary system was, if you do this, this is your consequence. If you do this, this is your consequence. So it was very, it was just like, you get into a fight, you get suspended. Punto final for X number of days. You get into a fight again, you get suspended for X number of days. It could eventually lead to expulsion without really taking the time to understand what the fighting was about. If somebody is carrying that anger, which stems from pain, or is being triggered by another person, or if there was an issue, that happened back in the day that they never resolved, because again, in our society, we're really not taught to talk about like when we're harmed or if something isn't okay with us. We just kind of keep going with it. We bottle it up. We carry it in. Things, we start to feel resentment. Then we start to act out. We might start acting aggressively or passive aggressively. The other person picks up on that. So it's really an opportunity. So the work is more than just like that conversation when an incident of harm happens, right? That's why having community circle time is so important, to have that time to sit with reflective questions and to share from your experience without needing or expecting that you're going to get anything back. Mm-hmm. And so being able to listen and receive people's experiences. And that we start to see each other as human beings, you know. So we do a community circle with MPU, and it trips me out because I get very vulnerable. I'm very real. Like and it can be hard for people to see my real and my humanity. Mm-hmm. I'm seen in a certain way. And the reality is I'm a human being.
Absolutely.
I mess up. I carry my pain. I have stuff, you know, on a daily basis that I'm working on. I'm insecure. I have self-esteem issues. I've struggled my whole life with not feeling like I'm enough. And so like reading that bio, but like my whole life I've struggled with that, but this is real. And we need to be real with each other. And so that's why, you know, I push the vulnerability. I push myself to be vulnerable. And it's always interesting to me, the initial reactions from people, because they get surprised or they get like, they don't know how to take it. And I think that is important.
I have so much to say there. First of all, I mean, thank you for your vulnerability and what you're modeling for us. And then also for bringing back of like that critical piece of understanding restorative practices. You've said this a few times now, and I want to pick back up on it, that, you know, so many of us, I would say, that are educators, activists, healers, parents for sure. We come with this big bag of trauma, little traumas, big traumas, right? It doesn't matter. Difficult situations that propel us and push us forward, that are like our passion, right? But we don't talk about it. And our way, for a lot of us, not everyone, our way of coping and dealing is the work. And as amazing as that is, we wouldn't be here. Like NPU wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. There's also the need to heal that work, because if not, like you said, heal that trauma and that experience, because if not, then what happens is we just turn into the kids on the playground with each other, right? You know, because we're all well-intentioned, but we end up pushing on and triggering one another's traumas, because like you said, end of the day, we still want validation. We still want comfort. We still want attention, right? We still want to feel special. The parent issues we have in our parents just flip into the issues we have with our bosses. And that's something that, you know, both you and I like really agree on, and try to kind of work within multiple organizations. Did you want to add in something?
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, so I just want to jump into this, because organizations and work, they consider themselves family. You're together during the work week, you're together with the people that you work with more than you are with your family. And I think maybe if you add up that, you're just with them more. So people at work, they feel like a family. But what happens is that it continues like kind of that dysfunction. And so, you know, what I've experienced and what I've documented is that restorative practices, and it's not just something that you do, it's a way of being. It's a way that allows you to start to work on that dysfunction and to heal things that are showing up here, you know, with the person in front of you, that are really about, you know, what happened when you were 5.
And absolutely. And, you know, you were so bold and vulnerable enough to kind of share with us that, yeah, you struggle, and that I know you, I knew what you meant when you said it was difficult to hear that bio, because you don't lead. I don't know this, that you don't see yourself that way. You don't lead with your titles, right? And you've done so much, because I know how you're paced. You do so much that I can imagine how hard it is to realize, like, oh my gosh, I did that. Oh my gosh, I did that. Because I'm sure that you don't celebrate yourself enough, you know? How did that process also impact the writing of the book? Because if it's there in your bio, it was there in the process of writing.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot in there that I think I can unpack, and I think that the thing about celebrating self. So I had told Atia this morning, or right before the show, I was like, "Oh, I'm going to do a show to talk about the book," and she was like, "What? That's fantastic! Why didn't you tell me?" And I was like, "I'm just like, it's not a thing." And actually, so I'm in therapy, very happily. My therapist this week, I was talking about an issue that happened, and I said, I got this, I was recognized, I got this, Champion in Equity Award, and then blah, blah, and she was like, stop. And one of the things that I want to do on the show actually is I want to start talking about the things that I'm proud of. Because there's my girl. You did. Because somewhere, somehow, I bought the idea that talking about the work, talking about myself in the work as accomplishments was not okay. It was okay to talk about the work, like, oh, this happened, these great things happen, but not that I did them. And so I'm figuring out how to integrate an I'm proud component on the show on Monday and Wednesdays. And actually today in Community Circle, I had added that component of like, name 4 things that you're proud of. And I feel like you go through those numbers, then it can help solidify. And even, so it's just hard. It comes from not feeling, just not feeling like I'm enough. And that's probably also why I've been so successful. Because there's legit, like, I know my mom is watching, but I just have to, like, legit, there's a little girl in me that wants my mom to say that she's proud, and wants my dad to say that they're proud.
Oh. Wow. Okay. And they are. And we're proud of you too, very proud of you. Like, I want to join with you in that feeling of like, sometimes our light is so big that like it even overwhelms us. And that's actually how I see you, Marisol. I know that you don't feel that way. I know you don't feel that way all the time, but it's the strength of who you are that I wonder sometimes just overwhelms even you, You have more people in here that you don't know. Some of my friends that are saying they're proud of you. And there's so much to be proud of, even just who you are sharing to this depth and this level of vulnerability. But also like, yes, you personalized it. It is who we are in our families. But there's a thing called imposter syndrome. There is what it is to be like, a light-skinned Latina woman, right? A Chicana woman. There is what it is to be a young mom, right? All of these little, and I'm not saying it's to invalidate it, but hang-ups, I have them too. All these hang-ups that we kind of wear that take up a lot of space in our brain, but that because we're strong and we're resilient and we're survivors, we just keep pushing through, but that no one knows, that we carry those things. And absolutely, I'm sitting here actually thinking of like how in some ways opposite I am of you, and it shows up in different ways at times, which is interesting. I want to give you a second though to respond to comments or anything.
Thank you. I'm seeing, thank you. I think you all, like, I love you guys. I love you, and the depth of the love that I have for you and the appreciation. But I do want to say, like, it's important that we do this. And even though it's hard, like, this is legit how I feel as a human being. And I think that this is what can make the difference, and not to stay hung up in it, but to continue. Look, I really believe that we are all working to be the best version of ourselves. And in order to do that, then we have to look at what's stopping us from being so. And so if I'm caught up in talking crap to myself, because I don't feel like I'm enough. If I'm caught up in the imposter syndrome, if I'm caught up, by stopping myself from doing the work that needs to be done, or if I'm even caught up from celebrating myself, I'm not being the best version of myself. So I got to do the work. And this is part of the work. Like legit, owning how you feel is part of the work.
And sitting in it. And so that's one thing too, even that I'll say for me, like that I've been thinking a lot about is, so I'll show you. One of my challenges, you guys, is being vulnerable in the moment. Later, when I wrap my mind around something, I can talk about the most difficult experience and kind of do it in this really well packaged way, right? But when I have to do it on the spot, that's challenging. And so then I'll try to move away from something. And I realize that some of the ways that I move away is maybe trying to make something that's really crappy, I'm gonna cuss, but really bad, there we go, really bad, seem okay or seem tolerable, right? And I'm gonna say this like without any judgment. I see us do that in spiritual communities. I see us do that in a lot of spaces of where we want to, I'm going to cuss now. We want to shine the shit, and sometimes it's just crappy. Right. And this, we have to sit in that emotion sometimes. And that's actually been for me a gift of 2020. Right. And that's what I hear you saying of that. Like, we have to feel it. We have to sit in there. We have to be in there. And that's what you're also just modeling for us as well. I'm just going to pass along some comments, right, that are coming with respect to what I'm saying, right? Judith saying that you were the first Latina that she saw herself in, right? And that how important that visual representation is. The vet saying, right, the release, the vulnerability, right? It's cathartic, right? So the cathartic meaning it's healing to kind of get it out. Tu mama. I've never been prouder than I am now. You are not only awesome, but you're my baby. Oh. Yes. And I'm actually therapeutically, this is not therapy, but I want you to let that in. But I want to say something too. Recently, I said something of like, we never stop being, a child, right? We never, and then it's sad. It's hard when you lose your parents, right? For whatever reason, because you can't ever come back, or it's hard to come back to being, right, someone's child. And it doesn't matter how old we are, like, we still want validation and attention from our parents. Punto claro, clear, like that never goes away, right? Because they are the most important people to us. And when we don't get that, that fuels our work, no matter how much we feel that we've pushed that away or dealt with it. It just always fuels us. And that's like such a testament to like, so then what is the National Parents Union? Like why we work the way that we do. So I'm aware of time, but I just want to, kind of bring in a few things. You have, you are the Officer of Policy and Strategic First. What is, I'm getting your title wrong. Officer of Strategy and Policy.
Strategy and Partnerships.
Dude, I'm promoting you, hopefully. So talk to me about like where you see NPU going, right? Given this book, given your passions, given your insecurities, given all we're talking about, how does that fuel where you see NPU going?
Well, I think, the work, all of it is so needed for our communities and our parents. Like really being able to have a space where we can come together in community and where there's a safe space to be brave and to do this work, because we made the decision to have children. And in that, then I feel like we made a contract to do our work. And I think being able to support one another in that work is really critical. And the Parents Union, I think, sees itself as that space, not just to do, like the advocacy pieces, which are phenomenal, the educational advocacy and the advocacy for our students, amazing, but also like an organization that is saying, you know what, your healing, your well-being, your family's wellness, it is important. And I'm really excited about the next phases that MPU is going to go into. But I think that MPU is the space that can build a bridge, like a very healthy bridge between families and systems, and help support the healing in both. And make that start to really hone in on that transformation that's so needed. And this is the time, like our earth, our systems, our people. There's a moment right now that MPU has stepped into to push, and it's such an amazing honor to be part of the work, like to be able to be in this space. It's just amazing.
Absolutely. I was, in other contexts having just very similar conversation, and the best, if I could only think of one word of what we're going through right now, as a country and definitely as a world, is like, we're remembering, we are remembering because we've had more than generations. We've had hundreds of years of one style of rule, a predominant value system, right? That really, it's nice for me to say ignored, like super nice. I'm going to stay on the train. That ignored, that invalidated, that destroyed other ways of being and other systems of knowledge. And those systems are coming back around again, like a la fuerza, whether we realize it or not, whether we're willing to accept it or not. And I agree with you that is the space that NPU has stepped into. And I want to put some credit back to you. Of course, everyone, Carrie, Tim, all of the contributors and delegates are amazing in their own right. But so many of us came here because of you, and through your network, through your love, through your hugs that everybody misses, right? That's how we got here, because you are that person who kind of collects folks, right? And links them up so that they can do their best work. And I think it's important. I'm not only just saying that to flatter you, as I made this statement that like we are remembering land-based, ways. We're remembering relationship-based ways. We are remembering kind of feminine, and whether you want to call it feminist or feminine ways, communal ways. And you are such a good model for that, in the way that you operate in this organization, and then also through your book.
Thank you. I do want to add, I think that part of what, and we've talked about this, but I'm not selfish with opportunity. And I think that that's really important, because if you keep the scope, like I'm doing my work, right? Like I'm doing all my work. I'm doing the work of my ego. I'm doing the work of my control issues. I'm doing my stuff. But and I'm going to go back to the introduction. I want this place to be as healed as possible for my grandchildren and their grandchildren and their grandchildren. And for that to happen, it cannot be about one single person. It cannot be about me. And so I bring people with me because like there's opportunity, and it's not, I'm not bringing people because I want them to like me, or like they're really good people doing really amazing work who need to be in this work. And I think not being selfish with opportunity and seeing things like, oh, that's mine, or that's mine, or this is about me, or this is about me. And sometimes I got to keep my ego in check, because I am very open with my opportunity, and I still got an ego. So it's still work that I'm doing on, again, because I'm a human being. But I just want to share that is, in what ways can you not be selfish with opportunities that are being presented to you?
You are not selfish, right? And yes, we all have ego. We all mess up, right? We're just, like you said, we're all human, right? But you really embody, that like reaching back and kind of pulling up one person with you, or the next person, or a community with you. I think about too, like, to kind of round this out, think about all of the work that so many of us, and us, however, whoever wants to hear that, so many of us have done to work on systems of equity and justice, and like where it's come like a whole generation around, and it's occurred for many years. So I'm not saying it like it's just something we did in this generation, but it's so amazing to be able to see the work and the efforts of like previous generations right now. And that's what I really feel that we're getting to see with that. Like, oh no, I can actually pull you up quickly. I can pull the next person up and create a space and an opportunity, because so many things are changing, but also because so many people, a critical mass, are listening, and then we're able to push forward the work in ways that sadly other previous generations that were working really hard, they just couldn't convert. They couldn't convert the action as quickly as we're able to now.
So imagine what the next is going to be like.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are out of time here, Marisol. Is there any last words you want to say about anything, but about the book? Where can people find you as well?
So the book will be out in January. As soon as I get the date, I'll let everybody know. You can find me on Facebook. So I do have my public page. I also have a website, marisolrerucha.com. I'm going to have some really critical components of the book listed for free. One of them is how to have challenging, difficult conversations, how to plan those out. And there's a couple of pieces that I want to put out there because people ask for them, and I'm like, I'm just gonna give it to you, like, here, have it. The other thing is I also, I just want to thank you and let you know how proud I am of you and how like beautiful it has been to be a part of your journey. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being my sister, my comadre, my main support. So I love you very much. Everyone else, please have a good weekend. I hope that this conversation spurs you thinking about the healing that needs to occur, what is behind your work and your passion, whether that's your little family or whether that's kind of like the big work that you do, and that you're able to use Marisol as a model for like maybe how you want to take the first step, to healing that, so that you can imagine what you could do out of joy and love instead of out of pain and wounding. So have a beautiful weekend, everyone. We will see you next week.
I'll see you Monday and Wednesday.